Taiwan remembers the Tiananmen Square incident on its 36th anniversary. Lee Jae wins the snap South Korean presidential election with 50% of the vote. The budget battle between Taiwan's central and local governments heats up, with protests outside the cabinet. Plus, is this the new normal? We find out more about China's aircraft carriers operating near Taiwan.
Any movement of these two carriers is going to be looked at and analyzed with a magnifying glass.
Welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Louise Watt. Candlelit vigils are being held in Taipei to mark the 36th anniversary of the Tiananmen Crackdown, when Chinese troops opened fire on student protesters in Beijing. Hundreds, if not thousands, were killed, and China's democracy movement was brought to a halt. Rick Glauert is live for us in Taipei at one of the vigils. Rick, tell us how Taiwan's marking this anniversary.
So here at Liberty Square in Taiwan's capital, Taipei, democracy groups, rights activists, NGOs have been holding a democracy market. There's been art exhibitions and film screenings, and it's culminating in speeches and a candlelit vigil for those that died at Tiananmen Square. Taiwan is, of course, one of the only Chinese-speaking countries that could hold an event like this. Any mention of Tiananmen Square is, of course, banned in China and also more recently in Hong Kong as Beijing tightens its grip of that city. But Taiwan's president, Lee Jae, on a social media post today, said that Taiwan refuses to forget the events of that day. And he said that democracies have a responsibility to remember those that suffered for human rights. The theme of the event here today is pushing back on transnational repression and totalitarianism. It's something that echoes here in Taiwan as they push back against the Chinese Communist Party's claims of sovereignty over Taiwan. Earlier, I spoke to one of the event's organizers.
因为台湾就不是中国的一部分，所以台湾呢可以在这样一个自由的土地上，可以纪念各种被人权伤害的这样的一个记忆。我们可以呢帮助中国的老百姓让他们恢复他们曾经发生过的历史的创伤。当然呢，在台湾的这样一个自由的天空与土地之下，所有被集权侵害的人民人权都可以在台湾呢进行所谓的这个民主的恢复。这是一种转型正义，这也是一种修复式的正义啊。
Taking to the stage here tonight are Tiananmen Square survivors, as well as Uyghur, Hong Kong and Tibetan activists in exiles. Scenes that are, of course, unimaginable in Beijing and Hong Kong, where in the run-up to this anniversary, there's been massive security crackdowns. Hong Kong's leader promising a swift and tough response to any national security infringement. There was even a raid on a candle shop there. But the message from here in Taipei is that Taiwan will not forget the events of that day, and they will remember those that died, and they will hold the torch of defending democracy.
Thanks, Rick. That was Rick Glauert reporting from Taipei's Liberty Square. Among those marking the Tiananmen anniversary is one Hong Konger exiled after participating in pro-democracy protests in his city. But despite having to leave home, he's showing how he's found refuge here in Taiwan. Laurel Stewart has the story.
This is Fu Tong, an exiled Hong Konger now living in Taiwan. He's guiding visitors at this Taipei exhibition on human rights in his native land.
其实他刚在导览的时候，其实速度哽咽，然后我就觉得，就是原本一个自由民主的地方，然后变成现在这样子，是一件很令人窒息的事情。然后希望这样的事情不要再发生在台湾身上了。
Fu and his wife were one of the first demonstrators to be charged under a Hong Kong national security law after their participation in the city's 2019 pro-democracy protests. They came here to Taiwan, where they run a Muay Thai studio while continuing to fight for Hong Kong's freedom. Fu is among those in Taipei this year marking June 4th, the anniversary of Beijing's bloody 1989 crackdown on students and workers protesting in Tiananmen Square, an event rights groups say could have killed thousands. It's a commemoration still taboo in China and is now banned in Hong Kong, with memorials removed and museums shuttered.
當香港已經唔可以再講、唔可以再悼念、唔可以再提嘅時候，台灣呢一個嘅存在就好重要，因為佢幾乎係亞洲唯一幾個國家其中一個係可以公開悼念六四事件，去討論六四事件。
Fu says increased surveillance since Hong Kong's Beijing-imposed national security law in 2020 has stifled dissent, creating an atmosphere of fear.
講一個政府唔中意嘅事情，佢就會將你拘捕還押，然之後唔知等幾時先至開審，你唔知會失去自由幾耐。呢一個係我哋好害怕，台灣民眾亦都好害怕會發生嘅事情。
And as cross-strait tensions escalate, with Beijing ramping up military and political pressure on Taipei, many in Taiwan view Hong Kong as a warning.
我们也很清楚中共现在想要对我们做什么事情，那他们的方式可能不太会像是香港当初那样子，对付香港那样的方式。
But for Fu and others like him, June 4th is not just about remembrance. It's a call to remain vigilant, especially as Taiwan's democratic future grows increasingly uncertain.
唔可以同香港相比嘅，因為我喺香港應該係最舒服嘅個狀態，同埋不論揾嘅錢啊，或者係我嘅生活嘅品質，應該喺香港會比台灣好。但係台灣有一樣嘢係完全冇辦法相比而家喺香港嘅，就係我可以喺呢度有一個好自由嘅空間，好自由嘅時間，係啊，呢個就係對我嚟講最重要嘅事情。
In his pursuit to keep advocating for freedom and democracy far away from his home, Fu has found a new home here in Taiwan. Eason Pan and Laurel Stewart for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan says it's looking forward to deepening ties with South Korea and working with its new president, Lee Jae. The opposition leader claimed victory following months of political turmoil. He's promising unity, but he'll have more than just domestic politics to worry about. John Van Trieste reports.
Lee Jae takes to the stage as South Korea's president. It was a high-stakes three-way election, and Lee's left-leaning Democratic Party clinched it with around 50% of the vote. They won't be the opposition anymore. It's 6 months to the day that the last president, Yoon Suk-yeol, of the rival People Power Party, shocked the nation by declaring martial law. The crisis that followed led to Yoon's ouster. This chaos sparked strong feelings and may have spurred the highest voter turnout in decades, at nearly 80%. Lee has pledged no more jolts.
여러분이 저에게 맡기신 첫 번째 사명, 내란을 확실히 극복하고 다시는 국민이 맡긴 총칼로 국민을 겁박하는 군사 쿠데타는 없게 하는 일.
At the headquarters of the main rival People Power Party, subdued supporters clap as their freshly defeated candidate, Kim Moon-soo, makes his own stage appearance. Though the past few months have seen bitter political wrangling, Kim's words are calm.
I humbly accept the will of the people. I extend my congratulations to candidate Lee Jae. I will never forget the people's overwhelming support and encouragement.
But while the election is settled, the president may find the road ahead far from smooth. He's promised to bring a politically fractured country together, but even some of his supporters say that may not be easy.
In this election, which served as a judgment on the insurrection crisis, the opposition should have won by a landslide. So while I'm pleased with the result, the fact that the margin wasn't overwhelmingly large also reminds me that we still face many challenges ahead.
There's also the question of North Korea. The president says he'll look for dialogue, coexistence, and even shared prosperity. But how he'll manage that is another matter. And then there's the fact that the economy weighs just as heavily as the recent strife on many voters' minds, something several of them mentioned even before the election results came out.
The economy has gotten really bad, and it's not just me, everyone's saying the same thing. I hope the economy improves. Also, the polarization of our society has become too extreme. U.S. tariffs are having a huge impact on us, and with the leadership seat currently vacant, we're in an urgent situation, especially when it comes to things like nuclear plant exports and tariff negotiations.
So the South Korean people have given their mandate, but they have expectations that could be tricky for the new administration to meet. Luffy Lee and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
Mexico says it plans to ask for an exemption from US levies on aluminium and steel. The tariff is set to double to 50% on Wednesday.
Pediremos el día viernes que sea México excluido de esta medida, igual que lo fue el Reino Unido. Es lo que vamos a plantear. Entonces, ¿cómo veo esta medida? La veo injusta, la veo insostenible y la veo inconveniente. Tres sís.
The tariffs are set to hit the US's neighbors, Mexico and Canada, the hardest. Canada is the biggest source of steel and aluminium exports to the US, while Mexico ranks third in steel shipments. The UK is the only trading partner so far to sign a deal with Washington, exempting them from these tariffs. US President Donald Trump has asked all US trade partners to submit their best offer for a trade deal by Wednesday to avoid tariffs. Things aren't looking great for world trade, at least according to the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, or OECD. The group of 37 developed countries says they expect global GDP growth to be even less than previous estimates. But as Chris Gorin reports, Taiwan's central role in the tech industry is saving it somewhat.
The global economy is cooling. That's the assessment of the OECD, which released a report downgrading its economic outlook for 2025. The organization now expects global real GDP growth to drop from 3.3% last year to 2.9% for both 2025 and 2026. The OECD, which represents 37 developed nations, made clear during the report's release that U.S. tariffs and the global trade war are to blame.
And the context is the significantly increased economic and trade policy uncertainty, tighter financial conditions, lower business and consumer confidence.
The news comes as U.S. President Donald Trump doubled tariffs on steel and aluminum and set a deadline for countries to offer up better trade deals. But his so-called reciprocal tariffs are now caught up in court challenges and could be struck down as soon as next week. The one bright spot in the report? Artificial intelligence, a technology powered by Taiwan's semiconductor industry that's seeing high levels of investment. I've been speaking with economists today about how Taiwan might fare as this trade war continues, and here's what one told me.
So going forward in the second half of 2025, the positive news is that Taiwan will continue to benefit from the AI boom driven by the semiconductor industry as companies invest more in this industry. However, the downside is also that Taiwan will see risk in the interest rate side, that it is not able to cut as many times as many other countries. So this is why we expect Taiwan to still grow at 2.8% this year, which is slightly lower than the OECD expectation.
So while Taiwan isn't fully escaping the effects of this economic uncertainty, its central role in one of the fastest growing sectors of the world economy is providing it with at least some cushion. Devin Tsai and Chris Gorin for TaiwanPlus.
Coming up after the break, what's Taiwan's place in the space race? Join us to find out more about the group behind Taiwan's first lunar device.
Summer is here and the heat is on. Get outside, get moving, get in on the action Taiwan style. From epic trails to wild rivers and sun-soaked waves, adventure is everywhere. When the day cools down, the competition lights up. Fast plays, big moments, and non-stop excitement. All the action, all in one place. Game on Taiwan. where the action lives.
Welcome back. You're watching TaiwanPlus News. A group of local government leaders have taken their opposition to funding cuts to the top, Taiwan's cabinet. Leslie Liao went along to find out why they're so unhappy.
A battle between Taiwan's central and local governments continues to rage as leaders from so-called blue municipalities gathered at the cabinet to protest a recent decision to cut their funding. This all began at the start of the year when Taiwan's opposition-held legislature made record cuts to the cabinet's budget proposal for 2025. Together, the main opposition Kuomintang and the smaller Taiwan People's Party slashed the proposed budget by a record 7%. They also asked the cabinet to cut $2.1 billion from its own spending. The cabinet recently announced that it would cut the central government's subsidies for local municipalities by about a quarter to comply with that requirement. And that's where we are today. Most of Taiwan's 22 local government seats are held by the Kuomintang. Taipei Mayor Jiang Wan-an led a group of local leaders to the cabinet to deliver a petition. They're asking the cabinet to rethink these cuts.
地方一般补助款大多都是用在社会福利、教育、照顾孩子、身障弱势老人家，我无法理解。
The ruling Democratic Progressive Party has said that the cabinet had no choice but to cut local government subsidies, as there's no other feasible areas where cuts can be made. The KMT has called the move illegal and said it will ask the courts to intervene if necessary to protect local government funding. Premier Zhuo Rongcai has proposed a special budget, one that would fall outside of the general budget to bridge the gap in subsidies. But the opposition has indicated that that is a non-starter. This protest falls short of legal action, but with the way things have played out so far, unless one party is willing to compromise, Taiwan has a long way to go before it sees a resolution to these subsidy cuts. Klein Wang and Leslie Liao in Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan's opposition-held legislature has passed a resolution calling for the country's biggest power plant to go coal-free by 2028.
台中发电厂应逐年提出并落实减煤计划，并在2028年完成无煤中火之国家减碳目标。
The resolution was put forward by the opposition Kuomintang and the smaller Taiwan People's Party. They say the Taichung power plant in central Taiwan, which is one of the world's biggest coal-fired plants, has damaged air quality and affected people's health. Ruling and opposition parties are already clashing over the country's energy policy. Taiwan shut down its last nuclear reactor last month, but the opposition is against the government's nuclear-free policy. The ruling party has criticized the resolution, saying Taichung's coal consumption actually soared when the KMT was in power.
台中人什么时候用废发电，什么时候火力全开，就在马总统执政的时候。
Taiwan's state-owned energy provider Taipower has said that going coal-free by 2028 would paralyze the country's power grid. 2 more research centers have joined forces to help create military drones for Taiwan as part of its growing ambition to become a major drone supplier. The MOU between the Zhongshan Institute and National Zhongzheng University is aimed at building drone supply chains that don't rely on Chinese components. It was signed as the institute released footage of its new Jinfeng 1 attack drone, identifying a target and detonating nearby. China currently dominates the global drone market. 2 Chinese aircraft carriers have been spotted recently operating in the Indo-Pacific. One of them, the Liaoning, sailed past Taiwan earlier last week. So is this a cause for concern or a new normal? Our defense reporter Jaime Ocon asked Thomas Shattuck from the Perryworld House Research Center in Philadelphia.
So Thomas, as of recording this, we're seeing 2 Chinese aircraft carriers operate in the Indo-Pacific. I want to speak specifically about the Liaoning, the one that's in the Western Pacific. Do you think this deployment is trying to send a message to Taiwan like we've seen in previous exercises or transits by this carrier?
Obviously, when it comes to something moving in the Taiwan Strait or the east of Taiwan, it has to be about Taiwan. And with these recent movements, I don't necessarily see like a particular reason why Taiwan may have allegedly made a provocation against the PRC to do something to conduct these exercises. And like, frankly, based on the movements, they don't look like that. They look like a normal kind of transit, normal exercise, things that the PRC Navy would like to do, going and regularizing operations in the Western Pacific and slowly moving further east in the Pacific Ocean. Things could change on the way back. When the carrier returns, there could be, that's when like a Taiwan-related exercise could occur. But as of today, it looks like a normal operation in the Western Pacific.
As China continues to modernize its military, specifically its Navy, do you think we're going to see more of these exercises geared less towards Taiwan and sending a signal and more to just training in general?
The PRC now has 2 aircraft carriers. They're not just going to sit somewhere in port. They're going to be operating regularly in the same way that other countries and other navies have aircraft carriers. So while given the state of cross-strait relations, U.S.-China relations, any movement of these 2 carriers is going to be looked at and analyzed with a magnifying glass. But there will come a time where, like, yes, you don't necessarily have to cry wolf every time the Shandong or the Liaoning operate. You look at, well, what is the circumstances that cause the specific movements? Is there something larger going on with the aircraft carrier movements? And we don't really see that. And if you look at the map of the movements over the last couple of years, you could argue that these movements are not necessarily even about Taiwan. They're more to the Philippines east, further south, and to Taiwan's east. So we don't really talk about what is the intimidation of these aircraft carriers operating in what is essentially the Philippine Sea. Why is the conversation always about intimidating Taiwan when, given the state of PRC-Philippine relations in the South China Sea, we have an aircraft carrier operating on both sides of the Philippines? We have one in the South China Sea and one in the Philippine Sea.
There's been a lot of speculation about how advanced China's Navy and its military is. Where do you think we are in terms of having capabilities to go out deep into the Western Pacific?
So yeah, they do have capabilities, like that's clear. They have 2 aircraft carriers that are now able to operate in the Western Pacific, but they're getting better at things. And like we saw with like the air defense identification zone incursions, we're on year 4.5 of those. They started in September 2020 regularly, and it took them a long time to go from the South China Sea and then using provocations or so-called provocations to move further north and now around Taiwan. So obviously they're going to need to have more aircraft carriers. They're going to need to be able to carry more aircraft and fly more sorties off of them and practice that in the Western Pacific. So I think we should keep an eye on those things and how they relate to other intimidation tactics of Taiwan. And yeah, over the next couple of years, we're likely going to see greater competencies. We may see them moving further east, closer to Guam or Hawaii, and then that may be determinant on what U.S.-China relations are, not necessarily China-Taiwan relations.
That was Thomas Shattuck from the Perry-World House Research Center. This week, we're counting down to what could be Taiwan's first moon landing. It's a historic mission in collaboration with Japanese firm iSpace. Joyce Sung will be bringing us the latest from Tokyo. But first, we take a closer look at the Taiwan-made lunar device. In this excerpt from TaiwanPlus's new show, Small Island, Big Ideas, Joyce went to meet the team behind the country's first lunar device. It's made by students at a research university, and there were quite a few obstacles to overcome.
Because the DSRP is hitching a ride on iSpace's Resilience lander, a big part of the challenge was that it had to meet very specific criteria. With ride sharing, you pay for an allotted spot on the spacecraft and you don't get much room to bargain. In the DSRP's case, the team secured 400 grams of space for their payload. Not a lot, and it could not consume more than 0.9 watts of power. An external hard drive draws more power than that. And another factor was that for the DSRP to measure radiation, it had to go on the exterior of the spacecraft. If it were put inside the lander, it would be sort of shielded from the ionizing radiation by the body of the spacecraft, which would affect the data.
We were able to design something that can withstand 33 times its own weight in terms of mechanical load, can actually either continuously face the sun on the lander and get to extremely high temperatures, or face cold space and go to extremely low temperatures, and at the same time be confident that we can perform the scientific measurements that we want and interface successfully with the lunar lander to deliver data that will be delivered back to Earth.
When the DSRP sends its data back, it shows up on this dashboard. And if things don't go according to plan, Zhou explains that there are ways to fix it from Earth.
那我们也有一些应对方案去做解决，跟 comment 的方案。对，那可能第一时间如果真的不能通得上，我们就是让它做 power recycle， 去看可不可以重新连接这样。
Zhou was sent to Florida to represent the DSRP team and witness the rocket launch on January 15th, 2025. Meanwhile, at National Central University, Dr. Chang and several of Zhou's classmates gathered to watch the historic moment on the big screen.
So we had a smooth launch the first time, which is very nice. Doesn't always happen. Launch is just the beginning of the mission, so there's a lot more to go. But we're really excited to be able to go beyond low Earth orbit, go to the moon, and hopefully be Taiwan's first successful lunar payload on the moon.
You can catch more of that next week. The full episode of Small Island, Big Ideas will premiere on YouTube. And be sure to tune in here tomorrow as Joyce Sung brings us the latest from Tokyo. Thank you for watching TaiwanPlus News. I'm Louise Watt. Take care. We'll see you next time.